Good morning, everybody, and or afternoon, I guess, if you're on the East Coast. We are coming at you again with, oh, hold on. Sorry, I had LinkedIn open on the other side, so I just went live on myself. That was really weird. It's very Inception-like. Okay, so welcome to another conversation on mental health. As you can see, these are very casual conversations, but I think important conversations that we have on mental health during this wonderful month we call Mental Health Awareness Month in May. Really excited about today's conversation. I'm just really excited in general. I went to bed at 8:30 last night, and I'm like pumped today because I got so much sleep, which is great. But we also super excited to have Elisa Garn with us today, who has incredible insight on the HR space, and that's today's topic. It's really what HR people are doing for their mental health, because I feel like they kind of get left behind. Maybe everybody feels like they get left behind, but HR gets left behind, I feel like, in a lot of times in the organization. And we're going to talk about that. And then, of course, we have with us our lead clinician at Nivati, Haeli Harris. Thank you both for joining me today.
Super happy to be here. I also got a good night's sleep. I even overslept a little bit today, and I didn't regret it one bit.
So. It makes such a world of difference, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm feeling great. Okay, so let's learn a little bit about you. You, Lisa, are an open book. Like, I followed you on LinkedIn. I've known you. I feel like I know you super well, even though we've only met in person like once. But for those that don't know you, let's go ahead and just do a couple icebreaker questions. So I've got 4 I'm going to go with. Okay. Let's start with one that is a little bit hit and miss, but I feel like you're going to have an answer to. And that is, do you have a good luck charm or superstition that you live by?
Well, I'll answer that starting with one of my favorite episodes of The Office is when Michael Scott says that he's not superstitious, he's just a little stitious.
Oh. Fair enough.
Not to go super deep immediately, but I feel like once I left organized religion, a lot of what I now consider superstitions kind of went along with that.
Oh.
So I'm not a big believer in fate. I'm not a big believer in, if I click this thing 3 times, or if I jinxing something by talking about it. But I do believe in being able to manifest one's own destiny. So as far as like your words matter, your thoughts matter, some people would categorize that into the superstitious category, but I don't particularly have a token that I use for such things.
All right.
But yeah, mindset is powerful.
So manifest a good destiny for this conversation today. So that's a really great snippet into these conversations with you. For those who are getting to know Lisa for the first time, this conversation is going to get deep, like real fast, and it's going to be awesome. So I'm excited. All right, are you a fiction or a nonfiction reader?
Probably more so on the nonfiction side. I really love business books. And my favorite, by the way, can I just go there? Can I just tell you my favorite?
It's your floor right now.
The one that changed my life. And this is such a cliche, but How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I read it because I had to for a team, work thing that we were doing at the age of 19. And not only did it change like my career path, it changed my life, because at the time I was super introverted, extremely shy. Like I couldn't there's no way I would have done something like this. This really? Would have probably given me diarrhea all morning if I was doing this back then.
Okay.
But that book, it's interesting when you look at the history of when Dale Carnegie wrote that book, because it was in the early 20s when, like the industrial age was in full swing. And this is also when door-to-door salesmen were starting to come out. So he, in a lot of ways, like architected what good sales structures look like, probably without even recognizing the impact that he was having. But that book is so much about doing business through the lens of empathy. And as later in life, as I've gone back and reread that a few different times, it means something different to me every time I read it, because I'm at a different phase of life. So I had a boss one time for an anniversary gift, got me a first edition signed by Dale Carnegie copy of that book, which goes with me every job. Like every office I'm in, that's the one thing that I take with me.
That's kind of a superstitious token too.
That's
right?
true. That's true. But it's also meaningful.
Yeah, for sure. I think superstitions can be meaningful. I don't know. All right. When you are stress eating, what is your food of choice?
Sugar. I am a sucker for Easter candy. As a matter of fact, my son and I were participating in a voluntary Lent. We're not religious, but we're like, let's give something up for 40 days.
Okay.
So over Easter, I wasn't able to eat jelly beans or Cadbury eggs or, well, any, ice cream, all the things that I love that get me through the hardest times. And I don't think I'll ever do that again.
It was a terrible experience.
I had my 40 days and 40 nights. Like I learned my lesson.
You got the sugar sweats, huh? All right. And then, so the last one here, I stole from another podcast that I was on, but I love it, so I use it. But I only bring that up. There's a correlation that we're noticing. I don't know if you watched yesterday's conversation that we had on personal finance, but if you had the choice to speak every language or speak to animals, which one would you choose?
Okay, so I believe that there is a psychology behind this of if you're more attracted and trust people, then you likely want to be able to interact and work with people.
Okay.
But I've also found in my life that people that have been deeply hurt or traumatized by people tend to have a better connection to animals.
Oh, we're going deep here.
I know. See.
I love this.
I would love to. Like
Haeli's like eating this all up. She's like, yeah, tell me more.
Good stuff. But for me personally, people like I don't think there is a love language for this. I tease all the time that LinkedIn is my love language, but truly like human connection is my love language. Like understanding people, making sure they feel seen and valued and that they, it's okay for them to take up space is what gives my life purpose. So I would definitely have to say it would be speaking every language so I could find commonality and connection with anybody in all walks of life. Okay. Not that I wouldn't enjoy the speaking to animals, but I don't really want to Dr. Dolittle all of my, don't bring your sick parakeet to me.
All right. Fair enough. Our running theory is that if you are big into nonfiction books, you're going to be picking speaking to people. If you're big into fiction books, you're going to want to talk to animals. That's our running theory right now.
Well, fascinating. We just proved it.
You so far are running the line for us. So
we're 1-to-1.
All right. So let's get into today's conversation. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. I thought today's conversation was going to be really important around HR folks. And the reason is, so I was talking to a group last week in DC with Haeli, and I was telling this group that I had an employee, when I was a manager, they were having an issue, a mental health issue of sorts. And they came to me, and like the first thing I said was like, shit, I don't know how to have this conversation. Like, I don't know what to do. Go talk to HR. That's what I said. And then they're like, that wasn't, and now I know that's like the wrong way to do this, but that's how I did it because I didn't know. And I just feel like anytime I didn't know what to do as a manager, I just say, go talk to HR, which puts a lot of stress on the HR team, right? And I thought that's why this conversation would be really important today, and why I wanted to make sure we had you and this topic available for Mental Health Awareness Month. The HR teams in the last couple of years have gone through a rigmarole like none other, right? Like they had to last minute send everybody to work from home remotely when that was really weird for people. And then over the course of a couple of years, they've had to bring everybody back, kicking and screaming, who don't want to come back, right? Because they've now enjoyed being there. There's a study that came from, who was it? Culture Amp, that says, about 50% of the people say that they are stressed, right? On average, employees say that they are unable to switch off work from home life, right? And that's about 50%. But the HR people within that same survey were at like 34%. Like they're having a harder time switching off work. Like they take work and internalize it, I think, in a different way. Probably because they're people, right? By nature. So with that, we wanted to start talking about the HR folks and how maybe we can put a little bit of emphasis and a little bit of time into helping them, right? As an organization, as a group. Lisa, you are an HR expert through and through, and you've probably have more HR friends than I have friends, period. And so with that, like, what are you seeing with the HR teams, like the people that you talk to? First and foremost, let's kind of talk a little bit about yourself and your background. Like, you have a lot of people in the HR space, and what are you seeing when you talk to your friends in HR teams?
Well, so just full disclosure, I'm not a practitioner of HR currently, but I've been in HR for 18 years of my career. I'm still very well networked within that industry because it's where I live and breathe. I go to HR conferences, both nationally and regionally, as well as locally. So having a handle and a pulse on what my colleagues are going through is alarming, if I can be frank. I mean, it's mental health is one of those things that I think intrinsically most HR professionals have cared about for a very long time, but it's been such a subdued part of the offering that we create inside a work environment because it hasn't been prioritized until people started committing suicide and having other very serious issues that were now impacting the workplace. If you look at the statistics of what it was pre-pandemic and then in pandemic and then post-pandemic, those numbers are alarming in a way that organizations can't turn a blind eye to it anymore. I also think that more prevalence is being given to it because we're seeing more of an impact at the executive level, where previously, CEOs and C-suite, there was kind of this expectation of the burden that they would bear of mental health and stress. And I'm going through it right now. I'm launching a tech company from beginning, and my heart palpitates every time I go to bed of like, am I going to be able to make payroll the next 2 weeks? So I get it. But I think that the pandemic started elevating that in a much bigger, more public way that started to get more attention. Because when you have the people of influence and power that start to have this impact, they personally can empathize to it a lot more. And so they start to prioritize it, and they want their own stuff dealt with, let alone, seeing that impact on employees. I know here locally in Utah, we had a very, very predominant CEO in one of our tech companies here that unfortunately took his own life a few years ago, and that shook our community. I mean, our business community was very, very involved in what happened and creating more awareness and delving into these conversations. But that burden of trickle down of what happens where HR is expected to be the department to manage and handle this, it's very much like parenting, where you give everything you have to your community, to your kids, to your spouse. Like, HR is the perfect analogy to motherhood, in my opinion, because you have to love your children, even though you don't love your children equally. You still have to provide for them and make sure that they have what they need and take care of their needs. But when you get to a point where there is nothing else to give because you are sacrificing your sleep, or you worry so much because you're staying up and you don't know what's going on in their lives, or whatever the circumstances are, at a certain point, a sponge can no longer pass off any absorption if there's nothing left inside of itself.
Sure.
And that is very much what's happening in HR. HR is a profession where it's just kind of evolved. Like, it wasn't a profession that existed like accounting. Accounting is like you start here and then you move here and then you move here and you take on additional responsibility. And it's almost been around since the inception of business, way before industrial business. HR is one of those that came out of necessity because work environments were terrible and people were dying in accidents and working horrific hours for terrible pay. And so it's like, hey, we need somebody to protect life. And then that evolved into, all right, well, life is protected. We move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now let's make it a little more comfortable. Let's introduce benefits. Let's introduce better working hours. Let's create a sense of community. Let's find, higher purpose for these people. So HR has evolved just like business has evolved, but it's come from these little fractals of what's needed in the organization that tend to be, we don't know what to do with this. It involves employees, so let's stack it onto HR.
Yeah.
So now you have typically one person in small to mid-sized businesses that is not only responsible for recruiting and payroll and employee relations and risk mitigation and business disruption protection. You have all of this umbrella, and then it's like, oh yeah, and by the way, you need to make sure that our people are feeling well mentally and emotionally.
Feeling really good.
Take care of that.
Right. Yeah. We put on a community at Nivati, just at what we call Brain Trust for HR executives. And I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations where that it is like one HR person for 400 to 500 employees, right? And then sometimes they'll bring out some outsourcing or whatnot and rely on finance for payroll and that side of stuff. But like, that's a lot of people that person is trying to take care of. And if they all have managers like I was saying, go talk to HR, like it just makes their job way more complicated and harder to do. There was an article, I wanted to kind of pull out some of this, these elements of an article from Forbes. And I always read Forbes articles with a little bit of grain of salt, but this came from like a community of HR executives. So I thought it was a little bit more interesting, but they wanted to give 7 tips or whatever it was to support HR teams. And 3 of them I thought were actually like the top 3 on the list. I thought were super interesting. The first one on the list was like, hey, you need to provide your HR team with more mental health resources. And I thought that was actually really interesting because one, I think every employee needs mental health resources, but the HR team themselves, like, I guess it begs the question for me is like, if you're providing mental health resources for your entire employees, is it just the fact that the HR team's not taking advantage of them? Like, do they not use the own benefits that are given to them because they're so busy? And I don't know if you have any insight into that, Lisa, but like that was the first thought I came when they're like, hey, have more mental health support. But I was like, it shouldn't be any different than the support they're getting for other employees. They're just not using it. That was a question I had. What do you think on that?
I think when it comes to mental health resources, that's a really big, broad term.
Broad topic, yeah. What does that mean?
There's a lot of little things that go into that. I can speak to my own experience. You know, for as long as I've been in HR, every company I've been with, save one, has offered an employee assistance program.
Sure.
And it's like a blip on the radar in onboarding. Like we barely even talk about it if we do. Part of historically, like, so, you know, I got started in HR early 2000s. So at the time it was like mental health was not on the docket. Like we didn't talk about it. If you were going to therapy, you were broken and you're a weirdo.
Taboo. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like the 60s, but it wasn't much, it hadn't progressed since then, really. So I think that at the time, it wasn't really disclosed because there wasn't a lot of priority or emphasis of it. The other thing, like since then, 5, 6, 7 years into my career where I became more familiar, honestly, like I was faking it. Early in my HR career, I didn't even know what the difference between a copay and a deductible was. I didn't even know benefits, and I was expected to train employees on them. Like, here's a slideshow. I hope you get it because I don't.
The broker created it. So there you go. Yeah.
I figured it out. And the more I started to understand about EAP, to your point of like, you as a manager directed people to HR. That's what we did in HR. We directed people to the EAP. Oh, you're going to divorce here. Call this 1-800 number. They'll take care of it for you.
And that number is not very helpful at times, right?
No.
Plus, because it puts it to another middleman who then says, okay, now you got to call this person. So if you think about this, the employee has now been passed off from me, its manager, to HR, who's been passed off to EAP, right? That's 2 pass-offs. And the EAP says, here, let's have you call X. That's 3 pass-offs if a person's actually struggling. And the person that they trust the most, which was me, the manager, totally failed from the beginning.
Well, hopefully.
We're going to get into manager training a little bit later in next week's conversation. That is a conversation we will be having for sure. But it's true, like it's really tough for that individual, but let alone for HR already.
There's a great book called The Effortless Experience, I believe, by Matt. Okay. The whole book is basically about customer experience when it was at the cusp of like, oh, this is bleeding edge stuff, which is now like, I mean, it's table stakes at this point. But in reading that book as an HR professional, one thing I learned is you have to make transactions as easy and scalable as possible with the least amount of effort if you want people to follow through. Right. And when it comes to getting people to find help for themselves or their family member or something that's going on in their life, depending upon how motivated they are to fix that thing, the more barriers that we create to get them that end result, to get them that help, there are so many touch points that we could lose them along that journey. And mental health is a big one that this tends to happen because, like you just said, we pass them off from this person to this person to this person. Now they have to call a 1-800 number that now, after that 1-800 number, they have to go online and search somebody and get approval. And then they have to book the appointment. And then after they
wait 8 weeks to get there.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Then you have to fill out a bunch of shitty paperwork when you go in. It's a terrible experience.
Right.
And this is all assuming, like, by the time they come to a manager or HR, it's usually in crisis mode. It's not like, hey, you know, I'm really struggling with my spouse.
Right.
We're having fights at home. No, it's like somebody pulled a gun on me yesterday and like I have to move out and I don't know what to do with my kids and I can't come into work tomorrow. Crisis. Yeah. So the complexity of mental health in general, of traditional services, of directing to HR, and the resources that we have to give to employees is very limited. I will speak to a little bit, though, of my last. I've been very open, as you mentioned, David. Like, I share my shit all over social. It's like I don't put my skeletons in the closet. I put them on the couch and like dress them up in hats and shoes. Yes. And stuff. Like, here they are. But I think that one thing to consider when it comes to those mental health resources is I've used them for the last 4 years, but not through my own company. I used my, at the time, husband's EAP and called them up and like out of necessity, basically because my marriage was on the line of like, go deal with your shit or we're done. So I now was motivated appropriately to go take action, found a therapist that I've been seeing regularly for 4 years. But when people ask me like, would I recommend him? I'm like, I mean, he's okay, but I don't want to start over. Like, I don't want to have to go through 4 years of all of my baggage with somebody else. So yeah, I guess he's okay, but I don't know if I'd recommend him. I don't want you talking to the same guy I'm talking to.
Yeah, sure.
But in general, again, like going back to, well, how is this working within work environments? Mental health to me is less about trauma control. Like, we're looking at acute situations and trying to solve them through chronic approaches, where it's like, instead of dealing with this crisis mode in a crisis type of way, we're taking that crisis moment and referring it to somebody that is built and tailored more toward a chronic condition of ongoing health and concern. And I think that that's true of like typical medicine right now. Anyway, mental health is so much more than depression and anxiety. Those are like the golden childs that get all of the attention, and they're kind of popular right now. And so we talk about them, and it's almost like this badge of honor, like, yeah, I got depression and anxiety, got a doctor's note for it and everything. But it's vast, right? And there's so much that goes into the conversation of self-care and the US hustle culture of always doing more. And it's almost, again, badge of honor of like showing up and working 12-hour days, even when you're sick.
Yeah.
We idolize this in our culture, and it's weird when other countries
So I'm going to bring Haeli into this part now, because Haeli, when we've done some of these like manager trainings and whatnot, like one of the biggest topics we bring on is like boundary setting, right? Because of this, right? To help people understand that it's okay to step away from work maybe, or to understand when something may trump work, which is hard at times, right? Since it's like such a big part of our lives. So talk to us a little bit about some of the boundary settings components that you are having with managers as you talk to different people in your counseling. What that looks like, how to set these boundaries, or how to make sure that you actually live by these boundaries.
And that's what's hard, is living by the boundaries. Something that Elisa said, I can't remember exactly what it was, made me think for HR, because I do the HR support groups and have learned so much about what HR is really struggling with, especially when it comes to their mental health. And I can relate it to how I feel as a therapist, where people come to me with their problems and I have to help them with their problems. And I know that there's a lot of people in HR that get that too, that people come to them with all of their mental health problems, and HR kind of gets forgotten about, like how to help them with their mental health, which takes you back to that last question. But when I work with HR, we talk about setting healthy boundaries. And you have to do this. We're trained as therapists to do this as well. We have to leave work at work. We cannot take people's problems home, or it's going to affect my entire weekend and I'm not going to be able to be present with my family. I'm not going to be in a healthy place myself. So I do work with HR and managers as well. We need to set boundaries as far as saying, I have to be able to say, I know these are people and I care about these people, but I'm also not responsible for these people. So I have to have these boundaries in place where I turn it off.
Right.
It's
so
not easy.
No, it's not at all. In fact, number 2 on this list, so going back to this Forbes article that I referenced, the number 2 thing on the list was make sure your HR team has a space to vent, take days off, and then it repeats, get mental health again, which I thought was funny. But the part I found really interesting is like, how many times has an HR person, when we go to an HR, because we're having some issues, whatever, the HR person is the number 1 person to tell somebody, take time off. Take a day off work. It's okay. Like, you will survive if you take a day off, right? And we have to encourage them. But how many of the HR people are actually taking days off themselves, right? Because they feel like they can. And I think, Haeli, this is partly where in some of these group sessions that you've done with HR people, they have a hard time taking their own medicine, I think, in a lot of these cases.
And they take it off, but they stay connected. That's what I find is they're always on, they have the phone. So if something comes up, because they feel they need to be there for these people. So yeah, they don't take it off completely.
Yeah. Okay. Number 3 on the list, Elisa, this is going to go to you because I found this to be really interesting. The number 3 thing on the list was, rather than simply putting HR in charge of recruiting, scheduling interviews, whatever their like day job is, it was recommended to involve them at the business level so that they can better understand all of the functions and roles within the business. In your role in HR and in your previous roles in HR and the HR people you talk about, how involved is HR on the business level decision making within the executive teams or whatnot? Or are they kind of like, lack of a better word, like bastardized in terms of an organization within the company?
The HR profession by nature, possibly because of the relevant roles that it's played in the historical aspect, which I mentioned earlier, tends to be more subservient by default, right? It's highly administrative, very reactive. And a lot of people that get into HR in smaller companies start in roles that are already administrative, an office manager, an executive assistant, something that is like working with the owner or the executive team that's like, hey, let me take that off your plate. Let me help you. HR tends to be very people pleasing and very high empath. So we very much want to take burden from others and bring it onto ourselves as a way for us to find our value. Unfortunately, that is not always reciprocated in a business setting because you don't have the same personal connection to, like, for example, a heterosexual like marriage relationship where you have a husband and a wife and they do different things for each other. And there's a balance, right? Of I'm going to do this for you, but in exchange, you do this for me. I think in the workplace setting, it's like, well, the value that I'm giving you is a paycheck. You should be happy with that. And so we're not actually feeling intrinsically valued, even though we know that the output of what we're doing is what we need internally to feel value. So what I've seen, I use this analogy a lot when I talk to C-suite. So I've done a lot of recruiting specifically for HR in my career, and it's super easy to figure out how they value HR in their organization. So I use this analogy of like a city. So you have a mayor HR personality, and that person is I should start with the traffic cop. I'll do the mayor in a sec. Traffic cop is like, blow the whistle, direct traffic, keep people safe and compliant, tell them where to go. But you're standing in the middle of the intersection and it's busy. Stuff is coming at you all day long and you don't have the time to think about, well, maybe if I put in a stoplight, that'll free me up to be able to do other things. So that tends to be more of like those office managers or a traditional HR generalist. Right. Then you have like a city planner HR person. These are people that typically have higher education. They're much more focused on business outcomes. They're usually like heads of, so it could be a CFO or a VP, but they're thinking like merger and acquisition strategy. They're thinking infrastructure. They're looking down on the city and thinking, where are we going to build the next residential zone? When do we need to bring in Walmart? They're not as focused on culture, and they're usually pretty disconnected from the pulse of the organization. It doesn't mean that they don't care. It just means that the delivery that they're offering is more in that C-suite level. Then you have like the mayor HR personality, and the mayor HR people, for the sake of the analogy, you know, politics are noble, but they love being out like shaking hands and kissing babies, and they want to know everything that's going on and tell everybody what a great place this is to live or work. They're high persuaders, they love influencing, and they want to know everyone's story. But the cool thing about mayors is they usually tend to be extroverted, and they're super great at connecting with people almost instantly. So they build trust very quickly. And a lot of times they can understand the pain points of what's happening within the city level. They can talk to the traffic cops and say like, oh, this is a problem. But then they can take that elevator to the high rise and talk to the city planners about, you know, hey, this is where we're going as a business. This is what's happening at the level of why we're not being able to achieve that. So each one plays a different role. And when I use this analogy with C-suite and ask them which one they want, number one answer, I want all three. Okay, good fucking luck. You're not going to find a person that can execute on all three of those in a way that's going to be sustainable. So once I really pin them down to what does your business need the most right now? What are you willing to pay for? Then that tends to help me understand, do they want a subservient role within the organization, or do they want a strategist? So that whole idea of like understanding business complexities, most HR people that I know want to be more involved in the business, but they either lack the training or skill set because they're so busy in traffic cop land that they don't have time or ability to do it. Or once they get there, they feel a huge sense of imposter syndrome, self-doubt, or they're ostracized. It's like they finally get invited to that, you know, proverbial table. They have a seat at the table, but it's like, but they're under the table. They're like in the room, but they're still the toilet.
It's a very uncomfortable table, like sits right here really high, like your chin's sitting on it. Yeah, totally get it. So, okay, I love that. If I had to guess, sidebar here, you were kind of a mayor HR person, if I had to guess. Am I wrong or am I right?
Well, considering I only used to talk about traffic cop and city planner, and then I was like, well, I'm neither of those. It's my analogy, making up a new one.
You became mayor. I got it. Okay, so this has been great. And we are running a little long, so I hope you're okay. You're good to just chat with us for a few more minutes here? Okay, fabulous. So as I was going through this list and everything you just laid out, it really reminded me of this book that I just finished. It's called Healing, Thomas Insel. I've mentioned it a couple of times in some of these previous conversations, but he talks about truly like helping people overcome mental health requires the 3 Ps. And he says you have to address people's the people around the people. You have to address the place, right? And then you have to address the purpose. And so I wanted to bring Haeli in to talk about this just a little bit as far as like the 3 Ps of mental health in terms of the purpose, place, and things. Because as I went through this list on this Forbes magazine article, and there's 3 others or 4 others on that list, but they all kind of had the same thing. What I got was HR people really need more support in terms of the people, themselves, right? Their teams. The place, just the department itself sometimes feels like it's a place that just gets stumped on by everybody else and all the managers who maybe don't know how to handle certain situations. And then it's also like there's a sense of purpose within the organization and like what their role is. And I think your mayor and traffic cop and your city planner analogy like really laid that out of like those people trying to figure out the purpose of what their HR, kind of what their HR purpose is, I think can really help. Haeli, can you just go into a little bit more detail on what those 3 Ps are and how they can kind of help somebody, and maybe we'll end with like how maybe we can relate those to HR people.
Yeah, because that's what I was actually thinking, because we know that for healthy mental health and mental well-being, people do need those three Ps: purpose, people, and place. It's crucial for mental health, and I think it's great if we can pull that out and then put it directly into for HR and think of kind of like what you said, having the purpose in the organization. And I love Elisa's analogy of the city. I think that's a great way to look at their purpose. What's their purpose with the company, the environment, the place. That part also goes into the purpose as far as what kind of place are we creating here and what's my role in that. And then the people, their support. I think when it comes to people, it comes to a big part of our social support system. And when we're looking for HR within the company, what is their support system? And a lot of the times they don't really have one within the company.
Right. Because the HR is the support system for everybody else. Like, they don't create their own support system, which is why we've actually, this community that we've put together has thrived really well. I can't tell you how many times the community's come to us and told us, like, it's amazing to actually have peers to talk to, and that I can have a conversation with. I think another area where HR has felt trapped in their own way is they have a lot of secrets about people. They are secret keepers in their own right, but they don't have anybody to vent to or somebody that they can talk to without feeling like they're going to divulge a secret to somebody that they're not supposed to. And I think that makes that support network, just an observation, I could be wrong on this, but that feels like making that support network might be a little bit tougher if you don't go outside that organization, or if you don't have that support network at home, where you can talk to somebody but not feel guilty about divulging something you're not supposed to, right? Because everybody knows everybody in an office, it feels like. That's we're past time. A little bit longer conversation. Lisa, thank you so much for taking a moment to talk with us. I'll end with you on this, as we've had this conversation and the experiences that you've kind of seen, and discussing like purpose, people, place. Where's your head at? Like, what is the one thing you would probably recommend to your peers and your colleagues who might be struggling with mental health, and you know, what's something that you could leave with them in that regard?
I will say I've prioritized it for myself so much more in the last 4 or 5 years, because I had enough motivation to get me to the point that I had to overcome all of those obstacles to start. And now I'm in an inertia where it's a non-negotiable for me. Like, I would not sacrifice my mental health at this point in my life for a job, for a family member, for a friend, because I know that I'm more whole. I'm a better version of myself to be able to give to those others, because I prioritize my own self-care. So what I would recommend, I've heard a lot of people when we have this conversation, like, I wish I could go get a massage. I wish I could hire a therapist, but I can't afford it. There's not a silver bullet solution for self-care. Like, I think that you have to look at your own internal motivations of what fuels you, what gives you, what fills your bucket, what it is. For some people, it's spending time in nature. For other people, it's being creative. For some people, it's reading a book. For some, it's like going to a smash bar and, like, I don't know, like destroying cars with sledgehammers, whatever it is for you. There are so many opportunities to find something that does work for you. And it doesn't always have to be something that costs money, but it usually does cost time. And when you look at the allocation of that most precious thing that we all have the equal amounts of, finding that space for yourself in a way that is refreshing to you, that allows you enough respect and care for yourself to be able to prioritize you without feeling like it's at the expense of others or other things that are a priority to you. That's the hardest part, is getting past that mindset piece.
Yeah. I love it. I think that's such a great takeaway, to prioritize yourself, right? You prioritize company, you prioritize your employees. It's time to prioritize yourself. And I think that's a great way, a great piece to leave, with our HR colleagues. Thank you so much for today and for the conversation. This was fabulous. Every one of these that I've done this month has been so enlightening. I personally have learned a lot. I hope those who have followed along throughout the month have also taken a lot from these conversations. This one is just as fabulous as all the others. We have more to come. We're only halfway through the month of May, so we still have a number of these to do. Join us tomorrow, if you can, in the afternoon. It's an afternoon session. We're going to have Logan Mallory on. I don't know if you know him, Elisa, but he's a fabulous guy.
Tune in. He is a riot. He's way funnier than I am, too.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's a toss-up. The three of us, I think, could have a lot of fun together. The topic for tomorrow is on gratitude, actually, which I'm really excited for. We're going to talk about the Thanks Matter campaign that they've been doing at Motivosity, and just bringing more gratitude within an organization. And that will be, I think, a fabulous conversation. And then we've got a number of conversations that are happening next week as well. Thank you again, Elisa, for your time. I'll let you just end. Where can we learn more about what you're doing, LevelNext, and everything else that's going on?
Most of my information I share pretty openly on both my Twitter and my LinkedIn. It's really easy to find me. I'm the only Elisa Garn on both platforms, so you can just type in my name there, and I think they've been hyperlinked on the chat as well.
Yeah, I think we've shared them out here. So thank you again, and we really appreciate it, and we look forward to continuing the conversation on mental health throughout Mental Health Awareness Month. Please use the hashtags Mental Health Awareness Month and prioritize mental health in your conversations that you're having at work. Thank you all, and have a great day.